What's up, party people? Today, it's going to be a more different video. Today, I will be looking at why Peel Godred is the most important branch line on the island of Sodor. Now, this video will be made up of railway series and TV series lore, as well as sprinkled in bits of fandom lore. Anyways, with that being said, let's get into the video. Now, the Peel Godred branch line runs all the way up to the Sodor Ironworks. Now, the Peel Godred branch line first started in 1853. However, there was an act for it to have another line built from Crunk. It was a failed attempt. However, that failed attempt had led up to the Mid-Sodor Railway. Now, when the branch line first opened, they didn't really have an engine of its own, so the Sodor and mainland engines would usually shift work around the Peel Godred branch line until they finally bought their own engine. The engine they had bought was named Hawin. He was a small little blue engine. As well as that, a new railway called the Cody Fell was built in 1900. But on the first day of the railway, the number one, Godred, had a fatal accident. Because of said accident, the chairman of the railway, Lord Boraine, had to have the railway closed down for 1 year for track maintenance. However, in 1921, Hawin had lost control while going down a hill, crashed at some points, and had fallen down a hillside. This left the railway without an engine again, and would have to go 1 year without an engine, making them have to reopen in 1923. This ordeal was witnessed by a man named Old Bailey, who says, and I quote, "I tried to stop the young'un. I shouted and warned to his driver. I guess he wasn't paying attention enough. If only there was a dang gone signal there." Many thought he was crazy based on how his grammar was, and thought him as a crazy hobo. So, as a warning, Old Bailey hung a red coat he had on a tree branch as a warning for what was up ahead on the line for no one to pass. Now, as Hawin was dearly missed on the line, many locations were named after him, such as Hawin Ab, a stream under the viaduct on the northwestern, as well as Hawin Lake, an old station on the Peel Godred, Hawin Dooney, a stream under the Scarlowy Railway Bridge, Hawin Lake Viaduct, which was blocked off, Cosney Hawin, which was where the number 2 Stanley resigned, Hawin Uri, which is a lake that's on Duck's branch line, Hawin Rasage, which was a stream under a bridge on the main line, and Hawin Croca, a stream on the Peel Godred. By 1923, the Peel Godred got a new engine, whose name was Lady, an experimental settle tank engine. In 1925, the Mid-Sodor Railway helped move equipment for the aluminum works and the power station, as it was too much for Lady to pull. It was bulky equipment for the tunnels and bridges. It was easier to be transported that way. The engines used to help move the equipment around were Duke, Stewart, Falcon, Bertram, and number 2, aka Stanley. However, because of his rough riding and derailing, it was harder to get the equipment delivered, as there was too much for just the 4 engines to handle, which is why the aluminum works opened in 1926. Now, it was nearly costing them with their entire contract with the aluminum works. The manager got fed up with Stanley and soon had them converted into a pumping engine at the back of the shed. Later, in 1935, the Isle of Man tramp steamers stopped coming to Arlesburg, leaving the Mid-Sodor to only rely on the mines for their working conditions. Because of this, 3 of the engines on the Mid-Sodor had to be sold off. The engines that were sold off were Jerry, Jim, and Tim. But still, the mine section of the Mid-Sodor Railway was closed in 1936, as well as the mines in 1945. But in 1947, the railway finally closes down for good. Stewart and Falcon are sold to the aluminum mines later on. But 4 years later, Stewart and Falcon are sheeted up in their sheds. But next year, they are bought by the Scarlowy Railway, making it their new home. In 1963, Cody returns to his railway after being overhauled. The same thing happens to Shane Dewey, the number 5, 2 years later. In 1977, Diesel is sent to help construct a new electric line that starts from Kildane, much to his annoyance. The engines' names were Jeffrey, Andy, Sean, and Steve. In 1978, Aaron and Bert are purchased for the Sodor Ironworks. In the same year, Spamcan takes the scrap train up to the Sodor Ironworks. This train had a certain scrap engine that gave Bert quite a fright. The scrap engine will now be known as Edward's ghost. For a few days, Bert refused to work at the scrapyard, so Thomas had to be sent to take his place. However, Thomas had gotten himself into quite a spook there, and he ran away from the scrapyards, leaving the scrapyard with a curse on its name. No engine dared to go there unless they had to. In 1979, Stepney had gone down a wrong line and was sent to the ironworks. Arian and Bert were about to give him the scrapping that he had cheated out before. In 1980, the Sodor Ironworks gets two new diesels, a big diesel named Diesel 10, and two twin diesels named Splatter and Dodge. In 1981, Lady was getting more and more recognizable for her looks and her work. This made Diesel 10 jealous and wanted to get rid of her. Later that year, a rock slide happens, blocking the way to the viaduct. Knowing that, Old Bailey had pinned a sign saying beware of the viaduct. However, neither Henry, his driver, fireman, or the truck saw it, so they continued on. Not knowing that the rubble was up ahead, they crashed through some gates and tumbled into a valley below, where Old Bailey could only watch. Later on, Hawin Lake is reopened, and Old Bailey becomes the station master. In 1982, a new engine named Neville had got on the broken bridge and had crashed through the barriers, hanging dangerously on the edge. It was now known as Neville's Bridge. Later that year, in the winter time, a statue of all the engines is put up at Abbey Station. The Fat Controller holds a ceremony for it as all the snow melts away, showing all the engines. And finally, in 1983, a waste dump is built with two new engines named Whiff and Scruff. Now that was the timeline of that. Now we're getting on to the real reason. Now Kildane is important for the standing stones and what it really translates to. Now for those who don't know, Kildane translates to Church of the Devil. Creepy, right? I know. Spooky. Kirk Mansion translates to Mansion's Church. And Peel Godred translates to Godred's Fort. As there's too much for me to read right here, you may read what I'm about to show on screen. Next is Kirk Mansion's history. Next is Abbey. And finally, Kildane. Now, how many ghosts and spirits and legends live on this branch line is immaculate. Most in any branch line ever had. So, it's technically the most important when it comes to lore. No, not Thomas's branch, not Edward's branch. This branch. Despite it may not have a certain engine to run it, it's one of the most important still. Believe it or not, it's technically a magic branch if Lady's running it, and it's full of ghosts. So what do you expect out of this branch, to be honest? Anyways, people, I am your host, GQ2, signing off.